Everyone wants to pick a Stanley Cup winner, but the real question is, are you picking the best team or are you going for the best value? Because in the playoffs, those aren't always the same thing. And in this video, we're breaking down the market, the data, and our 10,000 simulations to figure out which team actually has a real path to win and where the odds might also be wrong. So let's get into it. Let's start with the market. These are the current Stanley Cup odds, along with chances of winning the Stanley Cup for each of the teams. Now, the goal here isn't just to pick the best team and then call it a day. What we're really trying to do here is figure out which teams actually have a real shot to win compared to how the odds are valuing them. That's where the value is going to come from. So, not predicting the winner, but finding where the probability and the price don't necessarily match. So, if you like this Ball Street style, breaking down the market like this in terms of future bets, hit that like button. It would be greatly appreciated. Next, this is going to be the playoff picture as of April 3rd. This is going to give us our context. So, who's likely to make it, where they're seated, and then its potential paths that they begin to go through. Now, you will notice there are teams on this board that weren't on the odds screen, and that's kind of expected here. For this exercise, we're only focusing on the top 10 teams based on the odds that were given because those are the teams the market actually priced as real contenders. So, this board isn't about analyzing every playoff team, it's about understanding the path that those top teams would have to navigate to win those 4 rounds and hoist that Stanley Cup. Now we move into the numbers. So this is going to be our technical analysis. And what you're looking at are league-wide rankings across all the key metrics that we look at in terms of the NHL and having success. So these aren't raw stats. These are just how each team ranks relative to the rest of the league. We have power rating, which is our overall strength score for each team. We also have an SRS, which is just a simple rating system based off of strength of schedule and margin of victory. Next, we're going to move on to Corsi for percentage, and this is just going to tell us who controls possession more than anybody else. Next will be expected goal differential. I know you probably heard this somewhere where people say you always want to look at expected goals for and expected goals against. Well, this takes both of them, and it takes expected goals for minus expected goals against. Then we have 5-on-5 goal differential because this is mostly where the game is played. We will factor in special teams, but that will be in a little bit later. And you want to just layer special teams because most of the game is played 5-on-5. So just as a reminder, when you see number one for a team, that means best in the league. As the number increases, that means the performance drops off. So it kind of gives us a clear picture of how good these teams are and how they've been over the full season. So let's just run through them real quick. Colorado, as you can see, very elite across the board, number one in most of the important metrics. No real weakness here. Tampa Bay, very balanced team, right? Top tier in almost everything, just not dominant in one specific area. Then you have Carolina, very elite possession, right? They control play. They don't convert enough of their chances, though, when you do look at those expected goals. Moving on to Dallas, they're solid overall, right? They have a balanced profile, but weaker in possession numbers, which should alarm you a little bit. Edmonton, they're about middle of the pack. Nothing dominant statistically, but high end in terms of offensive talent. We have Vegas coming in next. They are weaker profile, lower rankings across most categories, and no clear edge. Then we have Buffalo. They're strong everywhere, top five in key metrics, but no major holes, right? But less playoff experience, and that's something you need to keep your eye on. Minnesota, they're very limited offensively, lower ceiling due to weaker possession and scoring. Then we have Ottawa, which is decent underlying numbers, as you can see, so good possession, but they struggle to finish. Utah will be the final team, and they are an efficient team, right? Strong 5-on-5 results, but not necessarily a standout strength here. So this is basically telling you how these teams perform over a large sample, which was this past season. The next step is going to be figuring out which of these profiles actually translates to playoff success. Now, let's move into those fundamentals, and this is how teams are built for playoff hockey. So, this is huge here. Just to mention, these rankings are compared to each other. So, they're not like the last slide where they were compared to the rest of the league. They're compared to the only 10 teams that are represented here. So, here are the categories that we went through when we're talking about, the factors that matter in playoff hockey. Number one, with a bullet point, is goaltending. This is the most important factor in NHL playoffs. It's in what we use were advanced stats that show how a goalie performs against high quality chances and his past playoff performance. Next is going to be defense and coaching. This is just going to be defensive structure and the coaching adjustments. So, how well a team limits quality chances and then how well they adapt in a 7 game series. Next is going to be special teams. Special teams, we told you about this already. It's basically power play and penalty kill. But you need to remember, it's also discipline. So, how often does your team go to the box? How often do they take penalties? Those also factor in as well. Then we want physicality. This is how teams handle contact over a full series, board battles, net front play, wearing teams down. This is less of a weight in the regular season, but in the postseason, this becomes a high priority. Teams get physical. Depth is also going to be the next one. This is scoring beyond your top players. What we did was just measure the plus minus from lines 2, 3, and 4 for each of the teams and then gave them a rank. So as you can see, running by the teams again, Colorado, most complete team again, right? Elite structure, strong goaltending, top tier depth. There's no major weaknesses here for Colorado. Moving on to Tampa Bay, highest ceiling by far, right? I believe that they have the best goalie in the field when you're looking at the advanced statistics when it comes to playoff hockey. And then they also have a strong defensive structure along with that. So that can lead to a long, they could get deep in the playoffs, is what we're basically trying to say. Carolina, system and depth, right? Controls game defensively, but lacks that finishing and maybe some of the toughness as well. Dallas, they're very structured contender here. I like Dallas. They have an elite system and special teams. They just lack a little bit when it comes to the physicality. Moving on to Edmonton, all their numbers show that they're very, very top heavy, right? Elite power play and star talent, but major issues in goal and defensive structure. Moving on to Las Vegas, they're balanced, but they're flawed, right? They have good structure and depth, but the goaltending has been a major concern throughout the whole season. Next is Buffalo, solid across the board, no major strengths or weaknesses, but nothing they fully, truly dominate in. Minnesota, goalie and physical team. That's what I believe. They're strong in net, very physical, but limited in terms of depth and offensive upside, I would say. Ottawa comes in next. They have depth and pressure, right? They play very physical and deep, but they're very inconsistent and they're unreliable in terms of playing defense. Utah, balanced. They're very balanced. They're very average, but they're decent in most areas, but no clear edge. So this is where we start to separate the teams, as you can see, right? The numbers tell us how good they've been. The fundamentals tell us basically how they're built, especially when it comes to playoff hockey. And in playoff hockey, this side of the board tends to matter more than people think. Okay, so let's briefly go through the market performance for each of the sides. These are how the teams have actually performed for your wallet throughout the whole season. So these are the money line results, not necessarily wins and losses. This is profitability versus price. So Buffalo, they're basically the standout right away, right? Best returns of the field, plus 19%, meaning they've consistently been undervalued throughout the season and in the market. Minnesota and Tampa, they've also been profitable, solid returns, not elite, but strong. And then you got teams like Dallas, Carolina, and Colorado, right? They're winning teams, but the market priced them pretty efficiently, right? So they're limited betting edge. But as you can see, they've basically been priced correctly. Then on the other side, we have teams like Edmonton and Vegas, both losing teams from a betting standpoint, especially Vegas. Heavy negative return, meaning they've been consistently overpriced. So this slide is answering one simple question, not necessarily who's good, but who's been priced wrong throughout the season. Okay, now the most common playoff path from our 10,000 simulations, remember this is not a prediction, but this is the most likely bracket that has come from those 10,000 simulations. So we're going to start in the East. We got Carolina, they get through Columbus. The Islanders take out the Pittsburgh Penguins. Boston edge out Buffalo, and then Tampa handles Montreal. In round two, we have Carolina knocking out the Islanders, and then Tampa gets past Boston in a very tight series. That sets up Carolina versus Tampa, and Tampa comes out of the East in 7 games. So let's move over to the West. Remember, we told you guys this is just the most common path. This doesn't mean that this is going to happen, and it does not mean that it is our prediction. So in the West, Colorado gets through Nashville pretty clean. Dallas beats Minnesota, Anaheim upsets Utah, and then Vegas takes out Edmonton. So in round two, we have Colorado and Anaheim both sweep their matchups, so very strong signals there. And then Colorado beats Anaheim in the Western Conference Final. So then we have a Stanley Cup of the Colorado Avalanche versus the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Colorado takes that in 6 games. So when you combine everything, the simulation is pointing to Colorado as the most likely champion. Also, comment down below on your Stanley Cup winner. I want to see where you guys stand. And if you appreciate this unbiased handicap and real sports betting education, make sure to subscribe to Grandstand Sports Data. All right, now this is where everything comes together, right, folks? We're comparing market rank versus our analysis rank. And just so you guys know, our rankings are based on how many simulations each team won. So this is purely does the market disagree with the data? So let's run through this real quick. We have Colorado ranked number one, both by us and by the market. So this is a clear-cut best team, but the market already knows that, guys. So there's no edge in betting Colorado. Tampa Bay, same story, right? Elite team, elite goalie, priced correctly. They're also a hold. Now, I do have a slight drop here for Carolina. They're a strong team, but scoring issues matter in the playoffs. So I think that they're slightly overpriced. I think that they're honestly a sell. Now, Dallas, we have them a little bit higher than the market, right? We have them one spot higher, but I'll get to that. They're a strong playoff profile, especially defensively, so there is a small edge. The reason why we labeled them a buy is if you remember the odds from the first slide, there was a clear top three, and then there was a drop off. And we agree that there is a top three, but we just disagree on who it is. And when I say disagree, we disagree with the market. The market thinks it's Colorado, Tampa, and Carolina. Instead, we think it's Colorado, Tampa, and Dallas. So if you have any signals that are showing Dallas in terms of a future to win the Stanley Cup, I think you may want to take a closer look at that. And I don't say closer look meaning kind of, analyze it a little bit more and then run away from it. I'm saying you may want to place that bet. Look into it closer. I think that there's some pretty good value here on Dallas. Next is going to be Vegas, slightly overpriced, I think. I think they're a good team. I just think that goaltending is so non-existent that it's going to hold them back in the playoffs. They just can't do it. It's not enough of an edge. I think they're a hold at best. Buffalo, this is going to be your sneaky one. So they're underrated across the board. They have a strong profile, and value is there, but not extreme, right? So I have them as a hold. Buffalo is one of the most volatile teams in our simulations. They go from being knocked out in the first round. So if you notice, Boston actually beats Buffalo more often than not in round one. And we didn't include Boston in our analysis, but they grade out as a very strong playoff team. So there are two takeaways here. First, Buffalo, if they can get past Boston, our sims show that they make a real run. But second, that also means that there could be some value on Boston in terms of game to game in the series when they play Buffalo, if it gets there. Minnesota, they also have a big, one of the biggest positive gaps here. The market has them very low, but our simulations like them more, especially with the best value on the board. I think that they're a buy. Also, their path is pretty good. In most of the simulations, they are beating Colorado, and the reason is physicality and also with the depth scoring. So take a little bit of a closer look at that matchup as well. Ottawa, slight downgrade. They're a fun team, but they're very, very inefficient. And especially where it matters. So I think they're slightly overpriced. I think that they're a sell. Utah market is too low on them, right? They're very solid. They're well-rounded. I think that there's mild value, so the price is a little better than it should be. But realistically, they're not going to win the cup. So yes, we have as a buy, but I think we have a buy in terms of their positioning. They're probably going to go deeper than people think, but do they have a real chance of winning the cup? I don't believe so. And remember, we said that we wanted to check those two boxes. Will the team win the cup? They're actually answering that question as a no, at least in my eyes. And here's the key here. We're not just looking for good prices, right? When we're talking about Utah or any other team, we're looking for the teams that actually have a real shot to win and are priced in our favor. So overall, you're not betting the best team, you're betting where the market is wrong. All right, well, I appreciate you guys for watching, and if you enjoy this ball street concept, go ahead and hit that like button. If you value unbiased handicapping and real sports betting education, make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment with your Stanley Cup winner. I want to see where you guys stand. And if you feel like you got some real value from this and want to support the work that we put into these breakdowns, you can always hit us with a super thanks down below. It goes a long way and will always be appreciated. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.